Hello everyone and welcome to another monthly update live stream. For those of you who are new, this is a monthly thing that I do, an opportunity to share the various things that are going on at the Digital Tolkien Project, as well as some previews of future things as well, book acquisitions, which we'll get to a little later on. Some good stuff coming up today. Thank you very much, all of you, for who are joining live. I have turned off ads for, at least for now, for the live people, so you will be glad to know you won't get interrupted by ads if you're watching it live. It's been a bit of a crazy month. As I was putting together a list of things that I wanted to talk about and updates to give, it was quite shocking to realize that since the last live update, we've had Oxonmoot, we've had Rings of Power, we've had the poetry volumes published. There's been so much going on, and so there's quite a bit to talk about today. Maybe. We'll see how we go. Anyway, hi everyone. Great for you to join. So yes, Oxonmoot. It's hard to believe that Oxonmoot was actually within the last cycle of these updates. I went there. I deliberately gave myself zero commitments. Those of you, some of you anyway, may be aware that last year while I was at Oxonmoot, I not only gave a talk there, but had to submit my master's dissertation. It was due while I was in Oxonmoot, actually on the anniversary of Tolkien's death, September 2nd. So it was a very, very stressful time, and I didn't get to see many people while I was there last year. This year, unfortunately, I did actually have to cut my trip a little short. I ended up changing my flight and leaving 36 hours earlier, so I still didn't get to spend as much time as I would have liked with all the admirable people that were there. But it was wonderful. There were some wonderful talks by people within our group, people like Rory Kerapel, Jack Ashbridge or Fornad from Artecraft, both gave wonderful talks. There was also Simon Crosby Buddle talking about his work with Paul Caulfield Godfrey and the opera cycle. Fantastic talk. So I encourage you to check out the recordings if you get a chance. But in terms of other things that have been going on. There's some things that you may not be aware of. Obviously, one of the whole points of these live streams is to talk about stuff that you might not necessarily see, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. One of those things is that Philip Nelson and I have been doing a lot of text preparation on the Great Tales. In other words, the Children of Húrin, Beren and Luthien, and the Fall of Gondolin, to really get them to the level that we have a lot of the stuff in Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion, and the Hobbit. So that's things like eventually inclusion in Search Tolkien, having a citation system, doing speaker identification, named entities, all of that good stuff. We sort of have this pipeline that texts need to go through, and I had started a while ago on the Great Tales, but it's thanks to Philip Nelson, we've been coming back to that. Unfortunately, I don't know how Philip is going. He may be experiencing power outages. I hope that's the worst of what he's experiencing. He's in South Carolina, but I know he is affected by the hurricane. So I hope he's going okay. I hope everyone is going okay. But anyway, I don't have anything particularly... Well, I do have one thing to show around the Great Tales, but we're going through that whole process of coming up with a way of describing the structure, which will lead to a citation scheme. And it's interesting because the Children of Húrin is pretty straightforward, because the Children of Húrin, like the Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, follow a pretty typical structure in terms of chapters made up of paragraphs. It's when you get to things like Beren and Luthien and the Fall of Gondolin that it becomes a lot more History Middle-earth-like in terms of interleaving of Christopher's commentary with extracts from texts and so on. And there's actually a tremendous amount, I think, of interesting things that you can do with the way that text has been put together, and I'll that may be foreshadowing something that I'm going to talk about towards the end. But one of the things that I can show is something to do with the citation system. But before we get to that, I just want to quickly say that Philip Nelson has been absolutely incredible. He's been involved not only in this Great Tales stuff, but in the Rings of Power data website, the poetry site, two things that I'm going to be talking about. The poetry site especially is the big thing I'm going to be talking about towards the end. So I have decided that Philip Nelson really deserves to be part of the core team, and so I just updated the website this morning. That Philip's just been doing a fantastic job, and I wish he was here to see this, but I do hope he is okay. But yes, coming back to the citation system, one of the things that's a challenge is how do we present potential citation systems, right? If you go to Cite Tolkien, you'll see the citation system for the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. We have a draft citation system for Unfinished Tales, but it's not easy to convey what that would look like and potential citation systems for other works. And so one of the things that I've done in the last month is basically set up a draft Cite Tolkien. And the idea here is that this is a website that is essentially the same visually, structurally as the official Cite Tolkien website, except that you shouldn't take any of the citation systems presented here as finalized. So it just has Children of Húrin at the moment. It will soon have Beren and Luthien and Fall of Gondolin. These are just proposals. So this is an opportunity for you to go look and say, hey, I think this is confusing. I think there's a better approach that can be taken, and so on. And I'll get Unfinished Tales on here soon and a bunch of other stuff as well. But just to show you, for those of you who are not familiar with Cite Tolkien, this is a way of basically navigating around the structure of a work, particularly when you've got a citation in one of our citation schemes, and you want to sort of translate that to the context of how do I find this in the book. And so, this is the current proposal. I think it's probably uncontroversial for the most part, the way that this has all been structured, but you can easily identify particular citations and what they correspond to in the book. I think there'll be a lot more discussion needed around the Beren and Luthien and Children of Húrin. But yeah, I don't think there's much controversy here, but you never know. People may point out certain issues or have suggestions of ways of improving the way that we refer to particular parts of the Children of Húrin. But as I said, the other great tales will be up here soon, Unfinished Tales, and we'll be able to incrementally add stuff here. So that's the Cite draft site. Before I move on to the next thing, I do want to just give a shout out to Tolkien Gateway for their membership of this YouTube channel. This YouTube channel does have memberships. It's a way that you can support it. And just a shout out to Tolkien Gateway and Ben, the founder of Tolkien Gateway, for his support of this channel through the YouTube membership. There is going to be a lot more content coming. It's just been an absolutely crazy time, and I'll get to some of the reasons in a moment, but I do have lots planned, including the much anticipated video on the English Dialect Dictionary by Joseph Wright. All of that's coming in the next few months, but I've just got to get through this month and some stuff in October and November too, which I'll be getting to. One of the things that's obviously taken up a huge amount of time is the Rings of Power show. I just had a realization yesterday, I think it was, just how much time I'm having to spend on Rings of Power. So I am co-host of the Rings of Power Wrap-Up podcast, and that takes about 2.5 hours to record every week. I'm teaching a class in space, just running a discussion group with Sarah Brown. That goes for an hour and a half each week. Plus there's watching the show, normally 2 or 3 times And of course, all of the work on the site as well, doing the speaker identification and scene annotation and stuff, working with Philip Nelson and Sarah Monnier, has been wonderful to do that. But it's taken up a lot of time. I worked out it's probably about 8 hours a week that is spent on Rings of Power. And so that's obviously taken up time that could have been spent on other things like creating YouTube videos and so on. But that will end in very shortly. We only have one more episode to go. Although one thing that's coming up next month, starting in actually only 4 days, I guess, is I'm teaching the last class of my history of the Hobbit space class. So I decided at the start of the year that when I taught the history of the Hobbit through John Ratliff's book, that I would split it into 3 separate modules, and the third one I'm teaching next month. So that's going to take up a little bit of time, but that'll be fun. And that also, I think I've talked a little bit about this and maybe even shown some stuff, but one of the things that's come out of teaching that class is text preparation around drafts of the Hobbit and stuff like that. So I've got a lot of Hobbit material as a result of teaching that class that will ultimately be able to be part of the Digital Tolkien Project, and there's some fun things there. So, Rosie, I teach that through Signum's space program. So Signum University has a adult continuing education program called Space. And I teach lots of class. Last year I taught a year-long series through the whole history of Middle-earth, and I've got some fun stuff planned next year as well. A lot of language-related stuff, hopefully. I'll hopefully redo some of my language stuff, but also I have some new courses proposed there, which I'm looking forward to the opportunity to teach. So anyone who's interested, please check that out. I'll include a link in the description. I know Sarah has posted a link in the chat as well. One other, so I'll just quickly say, just remind people, the Rings of Power Data website has been where we've been ingesting the subtitle information that we've manually gone through and identified speakers for, and then done scene segmentation. And so there's lots of really interesting sort of stats we can get out of this. And I think I mentioned before, one of the reasons I'm doing this is not just for Rings of Power, but this is building a lot of interesting tools that can be used for a lot of different Tolkien related things. And so a lot of the sort of underlying technology with these visualizations and so on actually tie into things that we're doing with the actual texts as well. So, just to remind you of sort of some of the features, we do break down the time codes by what region they're spent in. We do scene breakdowns as well, various analyses of characters and speaking and stuff like that. You can see exactly when characters are speaking throughout the show. You can actually, another highly significant thing that I partly did to help with the Rings of Power Wrap-Up podcast is you can search. So if you're wondering when a particular phrase was said or something like that, or do a study of a particular word, you can do something like look at where the word power appears in different episodes and stuff like that. Or if you've got a particular phrase that you want to look up, then you can do that and get the exact time codes and stuff like that for all the mentions of particular words or phrases and so on. So another... I mentioned the YouTube videos, but another casualty, I guess, of how busy things have been has been Rimbë, and I'm really looking forward to getting back to work on Rimbë. For those of you who aren't familiar with Rimbë, Rimbë is our annotation tool where we've initially been focused on annotating Lord of the Rings, and specifically Book 2, with information about characters and locations and stuff like that. And so I'll just go through. So you can take a particular chapter, for example, and look at the characters that appear, when the characters, at a paragraph level, what characters are there, what characters are speaking, what locations, and so on. There's a tremendous amount of work still to do, and lots of things we're going to be able to do out of this. But I just want to give a shout out to Robin Propst, who has been doing an incredible job continuing work on this, while some of us have been distracted by other things. But this is certainly something that I do plan to come back to in a big way and put more texts. Obviously, we've got to get the rest of Fellowship done, the rest of Lord of the Rings done. There's the Hobbit, there's the Silmarillion, there's the Great Tales. All this sort of stuff will eventually go into this in terms of annotating this stuff, and that's going to allow some really interesting research, knowing at the paragraph level the sort of details of locations and characters and events and so on. And we'll tie this into a lot of different things, which is a nice segue into the Tolkien Linked Open Data Project, which I've mentioned before, I've hinted at before. I'm gradually saying more and more about this publicly. We have the website's been around for a few weeks now, but at lod.digitaltolkien.com. So the Linked Open Data Project is really an attempt to enable collaboration between lots of different projects on information about Tolkien, both in the primary world and in his sub-creation. So that basically involves everything from the citation system that we're building, which enable people to refer to particular passages in a sort of universal way, but also references to people and places and events and so on, to really enable much better connectivity between projects. So things like the Tolkien Collector's Guide and Tolkien Gateway and the Digital Tolkien Project really coming together to be able to better share their information because of shared identifiers and links between text and all these other things. My goal is that this will also incorporate a lot of the sort of secondary material, scholarly works. I've started some conversations with journals. One of the things I would love to be able to do, for example, is for any particular passage in Tolkien's works to be able to discover what secondary literature exists about those passages. So that involves sort of doing citation indices of scholarly journals. This is all part of the Tolkien Linked Open Data Project. And I'll be saying a lot more about this, especially in November. So we're launching this on the 100th anniversary of Christopher Tolkien's birth, November 21st, 2024. It just so happens that there is a conference on in Berlin the 2 days prior to this, and this is completely coincidental. This was not planned at all. I'd already decided that I wanted to launch this on the anniversary of Christopher's birth, but shortly after that, I discovered that there was this conference called Linked Open Data and Literary Studies, and this is, to my knowledge, the first conference that is really about this whole idea of linked open data in the context of literary studies. And so I had to, of course, submit a proposal, and it did get accepted, I'm happy to say. And so I will be in Berlin the first half of that week. 19th of November is actually my birthday, so I'll be there for that. I'm speaking on the 20th, and the title of my talk is Lord of the Rings, Tolkien Subcreation as Linked Open Data. Shout out to Sarah Monnier for coming up with that wonderful title, Lord of the Rings. So good that even the organisers of the conference had to say how much they loved the title. So that's some exciting news. It's going to be a very, very interesting week because not only do we have this the launch of the Tolkien Linked Open Data Project and this Linked Open Data and Literary Studies Conference. But, of course, at the following weekend, on the 23rd and 24th, we have the Christopher Tolkien Centenary Conference that's being organised by the Tolkien Society and the wonderful Hannah MacDonald. And I'm delighted to, I got special permission to do this, but I'm delighted to say that I will be speaking at this conference. And I'm super excited about it because in so many ways I see what the Digital Tolkien Project is doing is continuing Christopher's work in terms of organising and presenting the work of his father. And Christopher often talked, and I will talk about this in my presentation. Christopher often talked about the difficulty and frustration with how to present the vast amount of information that he had in book form, and he had he did an incredible job with the limitations that he had. I think we can continue this work in interesting ways, and that's what we're really trying to do at the Digital Tolkien Project. So I'm thrilled that I will be participating in this conference, and I believe that the details of the conference and the other speakers will be announced very, very soon. It's an amazing program that Hannah's put together. So shout out to you, Hannah. There you go. Hannah's saying full speaker list will be announced on Monday, and we'll be opening registration too. So excellent. I'm just so happy to be involved in this. Okay. Before I get to the poetry website, I do want to talk a little bit about book acquisitions, because I do have a few things to show, including the poetry books I'll get to. But the first thing I want to show is the Adventures of Tom Bombadil. So I'm going to the hardcover signature series, which in the UK look like this. And as with all of the signature series, I think it's absolutely gorgeous. So these are my favourite paperbacks of all. I've been collecting all of them. This is the William Morrow version, which I don't like as much. I have the same issue with the Great Tales that have been published. If I put them side by side, you can sort of see the difference. The UK one has that lovely gold, and wonderful texture on the colour of the cover. The William Morrow US version is a flat colour. It doesn't have the lovely gold. I know there's not enough margins for me around the title. But anyway, I'm a huge fan of the UK version. Here's the side by side. And yes, it is out as an ebook as well, which I also bought. That's actually the basis for the Digital Tolkien version of the poems there that I'll point out when we get to the poetry website has been helpful. Okay, another thing I want to show. This is a acquisition that I can thank Carl for. He pointed out to me that this was coming up for sale, and this is Joseph Wright's The English Dialect Grammar. This is sort of the grammar book that goes along with the huge dictionary that I'll talk about in a dedicated video. This came out in 1905. It's just this really wonderful description of the sort of phonology of different English dialects, and then it does have a glossary at the end, not nearly as comprehensive as the English Dialect Dictionary, but it does have a list of words along with pronunciation in various places. So let me actually sort of show you an example. This is a random example, but I happened to come across the word farthing. So you can look at what it does is it gives a word and then gives a transcription of how it's pronounced in very specific locations in the UK. That's about half the book, and then the first half of, well, maybe even 2/3. The first part is, as I said, sort of a description of the phonological differences between different dialects in the UK. So thank you very much, Carl, for for pointing this out to me. And it was inexpensive too. It is a very nice copy. I'm very grateful to have it. I'll quickly mention a book that I bought earlier this week on the strength of an interview that Wonders of Tolkien did. This is John Hendrick's graphic. I don't want to say graphic novel because it's not a novel. It's non-fiction, but it's sort of a combination of sort of graphic novel style and other illustrated writing. This is about the fellowship of C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien. So I haven't had a chance to read this yet, but I wanted to point it out to people because it looks like a really, really fun book. You can watch an interview that John gave on the Wonders of Tolkien YouTube channel, a brand new channel that Wonders of Tolkien just started, and I am delighted to say that I am going to be the next person that he interviews. So I'm getting interviewed on October 2nd. I don't know when the final video will come out. Hey, look, there you go. Welcome. I'm so excited. But yeah, it was a great interview. Watch the interview, buy the book. That's so funny. I didn't know you were here. Wonderful to have you. Okay. Final. So I had hoped that my copy of Palma El de Lambaron 23 would have arrived in time. It's on its way, but I can't show it in this segment. But of course, it's always exciting when a new volume of PE comes out, and mine's on its way. Okay, the final book acquisition is, of course, the collected poems. The publishing highlight of the year, I'm sure most people would agree. So actually, as I so often do, and you saw I did with the Adventures of Tom Bombadil, I bought both the UK and the US editions. So they're almost identical. I'll point out one difference in a moment, but of course, there's been so many showings of this, it's hardly worth me showing it, but it's so beautiful, I may as well show it again. So this is the UK edition. You can tell most obviously because it's got HarperCollins. This is a really unusual combination of both being an absolutely beautiful book in all its production and just a tremendous scholarly effort. And I know I've said expressed some frustrations I've had about the sort of the data, but that's not really to do with the book itself. It's the limitation of books in general, and I'll say more about that when I come to the website. But this is actually absolutely a tremendous accomplishment, and it's a gorgeous book as well. Yes, Trotter is pointing out a couple more. They're still in the shadow of this book, but we do have the new deluxe Alan Lee Lord of the Rings that's coming out on the 1st of October, and then we have the Folio Society's limited edition Hobbit, which is actually being put on sale on my birthday. So I'm going to be in Berlin at a conference, and the Folio Society's got their limited. Is it 1,000? That they're doing of The Hobbit? Somebody can confirm in the chat, but it's in a very similar style to the Lord of the Rings, which you can see down the bottom there. So don't you all go buy it before I get a chance, or order it, I should say, because I suspect that's going to go very quickly. I can't remember how quickly the Lord of the Rings ones went, but they went extremely quickly. It's funny because I get lots of email from the Folio Society, and they, for most other books that are limited edition, they take a while to sell, and you get these emails saying we've only got 50 left, we've only got 20 left, and it's over a period of weeks. I'm sure this Hobbit's going to go in a matter of hours. Anyway, so this is the UK version. I just wanted to quickly compare it to. UK version. Quickly compare it to the US version. Just because this is one thing I can do. A lot of people don't have both. So this is the UK version, US version, and of course you can see the William Morrow imprint there. The other thing that you'll notice, otherwise it's almost identical, bound at exactly the same printer printed and bound it in Italy, the same printer, but you'll notice there's a little bit of extra space here, and you can see that most obviously if I hold them side by side. You'll see that there's a gap in the US version that does not exist in the UK version. That's really the only difference. And it's funny because one of the criticisms that I know was made of the History Middle Earth boxed set was they were hard to get the books out because they were very tight. That is not a problem even in the UK version. And it's certainly not a problem in the US version. I like Trotter's theory that basically what happened was they were told leave some extra room so it's easy to get the books out, and so they adjusted it, but then somehow for the William Morrow versions they got the message twice, and it had already been, the size had already been increased when they got told make it even bigger. I think that's a great theory, but it is noticeably bigger. It's not really a problem, but it is interesting to see side by side. Okay, let me just put these away. Let's finish up now talking about the poetry site that we started. So just to give a bit of background, really, really early on in the history of the Digital Tolkien Project, one of the things that I thought would be helpful to do would be to produce a database of the poetry. And one of the things I was particularly interested in doing is including in that database sort of formal elements, things like what the rhyming scheme was, what the metrical scheme was, and so on. And so I started doing a little bit of work just on what was in the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and so on, doing an analysis of those. And then a little later on, Hannah MacDonald expressed her desire to see a collected poems. She had a very now famous tweet where she said, wouldn't it be great if there was a collected poems that put together all this sort of stuff? And Hannah and I talked about it. I think it was probably the first thing that Hannah and I collaborated on. Hannah started going through the poems in History Middle Earth, and we had a spreadsheet. We're putting together this sort of stuff. And it's funny because if you look at that spreadsheet, I have a comment at one point, and this is a couple of years ago, before we knew that Wayne and Christina were working on this, or before I knew, certainly. I had a comment on the spreadsheet basically saying, I bet Wayne and Christina have a good catalogue of the poems. Little did I know that not only did they have an excellent catalogue of the poems, they were actually working on the collected poems volume. So, let me switch to the site. So, about a month ago, just after I'd recorded the last update, I thought now with this, the book had been announced, the collected poems volumes had been announced. I thought there's still a need for the kind of thing I'd originally envisaged, right? I'd always thought of, as I said, this sort of database, or what I was referring to as a catalogue of verse, that would have the metadata, it would have analysis, there'd be a citation system and all that kind of stuff. But it did occur to me that even with the publication of the books, there was still some really interesting things we could do in terms of having this database that would let you visualize the information, query it in interesting ways. The sorts of things I was envisaging doing is being able to study how Tolkien rhymes certain words, or for certain formal structures, when did he first introduce them, and so on, and be able to sort of visualize all of that kind of information. And so we started work on this site. I say we, not only the Digital Tolkien Project, but also Tolkien Collector's Guide and Tolkien Gateway. And before the books came out, all we had to go by was the table of contents. And even that was something I could build a little something around. So I ended up building an interface that let you very quickly sort of find poems. So you can start typing Tom Bombadil and immediately filter down to the particular poems. I made a bit of a misunderstanding of exactly what the table of contents was conveying, in particular because those of you who've seen the book know they've grouped together versions of what they deem the same poem. In some cases, it's obvious that it's the same poem in different versions thereof. In other cases, they've sort of made a call that maybe, it's a little fuzzier whether you really consider it the same poem or two different poems and that kind of stuff. But what they did when they grouped these poems together is they titled... I thought they were titling the individual poems, but what they're in fact doing is titling the group. And Wayne and Christina throw out all of the possible titles that somebody might use to refer to one of the poems in that group, that set. And so it's made things a little more difficult because at the end of the day, I wanted to have an entry on each poem. A lot of the poems don't actually have titles. It's a very complicated thing to deal with just titles, much less anything else. But anyway, the upshot of it all, this is still ongoing work. Sarah Monier's been a wonderful help in this, but I still need to finish going through and working out what titles the individual versions have. Because the way that Wayne and Christina do this is they have a set. So take something like their very first set, what they call number one. It actually comes in, I'll drill down to this. It actually comes in 4 different versions that they call 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. There may actually be more versions as well. One thing that became clear once we held the actual books in our hand was that there are additional versions in many cases that they're not giving the full text of. And so those letterings, 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, are just the versions of the poem that Wayne and Christina have chosen to show. And they talk about other versions and differences between versions in their sort of commentary and notes and so on. It's challenging to model, but I've tried to do the best I can. But you do end up on the Tolkien Poetry website having a page for every single sort of version that they present a full text of. And so you can look here to see what the other versions are. I've put in information about what page that set starts on. And because I've now started incorporating the actual text, this isn't perfect yet and isn't finished, but it's sort of the first version of it's done. For every single one of these poems, I've got the text in the database. I can't obviously show it for copyright reasons, but I can show the first line. I've got the count of the number of lines. I've got the number of tokens. And I was quite proud of this visualization. I wanted a way of very quickly conveying what I call here the shape of the poem. This is in terms of the stanzas, the indentation, that sort of stuff. You can actually toggle the tokens here as well to actually sort of see. Without revealing the text, you can get a sense of the size of the poem, the structure of it, and so on. So you can go to other poems and sort of get a sense of their structure. One other thing that I did and continuing to do with help from Sarah and others is being able to bring together collections of poems that share some characteristic, like they're in the Adventures of Tom Bombadil, or they're the poems in The Hobbit. We're going to have soon the poems that are in Lord of the Rings. We'll have stuff for History of Middle-earth and so on. So what we have here is this sort of a list of the poems that are in the Adventures of Tom Bombadil linked to the entries that are coming from the collected poems. So we've got both the citation within Adventures of Tom Bombadil. So the Hoard, for example, is poem 14 in the Adventures of Tom Bombadil, but it's 69E in in Skull and Hammond. And so you can go to this, you can see the first line, you can see where the set starts in the collected poems, you can see the other versions, you can see that it appears in Adventures of Tom Bombadil, and you can look at the shape, so you can actually see sort of the structure of the stanza breaks and so on. One other thing you can do is you can navigate through the poems in along different axes. You can go by the order that they appear in the collected poems, you can go by alphabetical order, and you can go by the order in whatever collection it's in. So in this case, Adventures of Tom Bombadil. But yeah, if it's in The Hobbit or it's in Lord of the Rings, you'll be able to read them in that order too. Once there's more metadata that we've entered around time of composition and so on, we'll be able to do a lot more with that sort of stuff. I'm really looking forward to getting date metadata in here. Not only will that allow some interesting sort of navigation, but visualizations of change over time and when, as I said, when Tolkien introduced certain ideas for the first time. You'll notice you get cases here, for example, where there's two titles, and that's simply because we haven't gotten yet to look at 134H and decide, is it called Looney or the Seabell? So again, what's happened is Skull and Hammond have called the whole set of 134 Looney or the Seabell, and it's most likely that at some point it was called Looney and then it changed to the Seabell. Sometimes it's a little more complicated than that, and we just need to go through and read the notes and work out exactly which versions are called Looney and which versions are called the Seabell, or which versions don't have a title at all, and so on. The title splits have been one of the things, unexpected challenges of all of this sort of stuff. But there's a lot more to do. One of the things I'll be able to do fairly soon is it being searchable. So one of the things that won't require a tremendous amount of additional work is being able to search for words or phrases and see what poems use them. Some of the more complicated stuff around the analyses of meter and rhyme and stuff like that will take more. There's a lot of, I should point out, there's a lot of prior art in this. There are some wonderful digital humanities projects on poetry databases that do things like record all the different rhyming, so you can look up a particular word and see all the other words that rhyme with it within that particular corpus of poems, and this is something that I'm wanting to do here. Many of you know that I'm fascinated by certain rhymes that Tolkien does that reveal his dialectical pronunciation of certain words. One of the notable ones, because it's also relevant to Appendix E in Lord of the Rings, is his rhyming of were with hair in Lord of the Rings, in one of the poems in Lord of the Rings, which is consistent with the fact that in Appendix E, when he's saying how to pronounce the letter E in his Elvish languages, it's clearly intended to be an air sound, but he gives were as the example word. And so there's a lot of really interesting things that are going to come out of this sort of more computational analysis of the poems that I'm really looking forward to getting to. Yes, so when there are caesuras in like where there are half lines in alliterative verse, yes, it will be shown in the poem shapes. I'm not sure if it is at the moment. Let me take a look. I can test this because we do have like if we go to the alliterative, so it doesn't look like I have it at the moment, but we will definitely include that. Because that's another thing as well as rhyme, showing alliteration. One thing I have been playing around with, just to let people know, is getting pronunciation information from sources like Wiktionary and so on, and tying them to the words that are here. So at the moment, there's a page for each poem, but my goal is to have a page for each word as well that you can look up that has information not only about what poems that word appears in, but how that word's pronounced, what it's rhymed with, what it's alliterated with, all of that kind of stuff at a word level. So there'll be some interesting stuff here. And obviously, some of the metadata around that will also include sort of word level metadata, etymology, whether it's a Germanic word or a Latinate word, whether it's an Elvish word or actually an Old English word and stuff like that, because we get all of that in these poems. And so that'll also tie it to the Tolkien glossary. There'll be some linking there. Okay, that is all I have for now. There's a lot more to do with this Tolkien poetry website, but I'm very excited to finally have something out there. And of course, it would not be possible without the amazing work that Wayne and Christina have done over the last 8 years. I think it's been 8 years since they first had that meeting at HarperCollins, where they were invited to embark on this amazing project. But there's still so much more to do, and again, it's something that if people are interested in helping out with, this is certainly something that you can do if you own the the volumes. There's definitely things you can help with in terms of whether it's the title splitting or the sort of, when we get to it, the analysis and so on. Okay, well, as I said, that's it for now. I don't know if anyone has any questions or other comments that they want to make. So this, all of the books I think in the background are Tolkien books. In fact, this shelf here is entirely History Middle Earth. But yes, I like looking at people's bookshelves too. But I've only got my Tolkien books here, and I mean this is not my only Tolkien shelf. There's some more books over there. Thank you very much for joining me for this video. I will post it soon and put in chapter the time codes and stuff like that for people that want to look at particular things. Thanks again to Ben at Tolkien Gateway for his membership of this site. And I look forward to seeing many of you in Discord or in the next update. Thanks, everyone.